Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about it seemed really cool to me. It wasn't until I was 13 that my mom finally let me. She told me to wear my helmet, have my phone, take a flashlight, and she set the parameters for where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which was a lot to me. So right after the sunset, I was off. I loved it. There were no people out walking their dogs, no kids running around, and the temperature was perfect. It was so fun that I ignored the limits my mom set. You see, where I was biking was all walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas between 2 neighborhoods. There's this long path that went at least 600 feet at a 25-degree angle. I was flying down this hill, having an absolute blast, and darted right through the parameters. My mom set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to houses and people. The outside, more specifically, the place where the path I was on lead to, was barren. I rode along this path for 10 minutes before I could only see some of the lights of the houses on the inside of the limits. After 15 minutes of riding along this dirt path, I hear singing. It sounded about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. I stopped riding to hear it better. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, but she wasn't saying the words, just the melody of the vocals. Her voice was strange. You know how when you have phlegm in your throat, your voice gets scratchy? That's what her voice sounded like. I inched forward to try and see her. I get close enough to see the silhouette of hair bouncing up and down like she was headbanging. I decided to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking that maybe this person needs help or something. Or maybe this is an insane person and the light will scare them away. So I take the flashlight out of my pocket, point it at her, and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be sticking together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped off too. She was wearing a very oversized, bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too. I conjured up as much bravery as I could and said sorry in a very oops, this is the wrong room kind of way. She didn't respond. I turned off the flashlight and put it back in my pocket. Just as I was turning my bike around, she screamed. She screams in an awful, awful high-pitched voice. I damn near shit myself as I throw myself back onto my bike. I hear her voice getting closer to me. I book it as fast as I can. I double up behind me, and I don't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until it dissolved into the howling of the wind. That was the last time I ignored my mom's parameters for night rides. In Toronto, there is a subway system run by the TTC, or Toronto Transit Commission. They often square off certain parts of the subway route, which is pretty fucking basic, in order to do some upgrades or fix bits. Lately, they've been shutting down the subway rides into downtown on the weekends. Anyway, they were doing some upgrades on the track, and we were going by pretty slow, making sure not to run over anyone while they scampered out of the way. Out of nowhere, the power was cut out. Now, I should say that I wasn't the only one in the train car. The cars are decently long, and I was at one end and some woman was at the other end. When I walked onto the train, it was up at her end where there was a giant bubble of seats empty around her. She was displaying the typical signs of batshit crazy, and people sort of avoided her. Everyone else was getting off at Yonge, but I still had another couple stops east to go. She was laughing audibly, and I tried to tune it out by listening to some music, but it never really worked. It was so chilling that my brain sort of just kept ignoring the music and focusing on her, so eventually I just unplugged the music and sat back, trying not to shit my pants. So anyway, the power cuts out, and here I am sitting at one end as far away from her as I could possibly be, and the lights turn off for some reason. She stopped laughing. In fact, she stopped making any noise at all. When the lights came back on about 5 seconds later, when I had sufficiently shit my pants, she wasn't at the far end. She was about 3 seats away from me, staring at me. The second the train stopped, I bolted for the fucking door. After she relocated, she didn't make another sound, she just kept staring. Fucking creepiest moment of my life. During my first year of college, my brother, 8 years older, lived about 2 blocks up the street from where my dorm was. This made it super easy to go over and hang out since we've always been close. Well, this particular night, a Thursday I think, I decided to head home a little early and leave his place at about 11. I step outside onto the street and it is oddly empty. I can only see one other person in sight, and he's directly across the street. He was making all sorts of weird guttural noises and wigging out, but this being in the city, I see that all the time. So I just left and thought about putting in my headphones to listen to some music. I'm glad I didn't, because the noise from the guy suddenly stopped after I walked about 10 feet. The abrupt silence was unnerving, and I looked back over at him. He had stopped moving and was staring directly at me. Then he made a fucking beeline across the street for me. I picked up my pace and looked back once I reached the end of the block. He was about 70 feet away now and hobbled slash running like some kind of zombie. So I freak out and start running back to the dorms with him in hot pursuit, and now he's making these slurping noises with his tongue and groaning. As I near the door to the dorm, I hope to God that my security card works on the first swipe. It never did. I jump the short 4 stairs and zip my card as the guy is now about 25 to 30 feet away and still running. Card reader flashes green and I grab the door, rush inside, and slam it back closed behind me. A group of students are just about to go out the door, but I stop them and tell them to wait. The guy comes all the way up to the door, gives us the creepiest sinister smile, and paces for a little bit outside before slinking back off into the darkness. The thing about him that scared me the most was whenever I looked back or when he was at the door, he had constant eye contact. I never want to see that hungry look in someone's eyes again. One night, around 3 a.m., I was dead asleep with my ex-boyfriend next to me. All of a sudden, I hear someone in my house asking if anyone was home. I woke up my ex and told him to go see what the hell was going on. He was a total chicken shit and made me go. I get out of bed, can't find my glasses, but the guy is still shouting. I come out of my bedroom in my pajamas and see there is a big bald dude in what looks to be a police uniform standing in my entryway. I'm squinting trying to get a good look at him, and he looks at me and says, "I just wanted to tell you that your door was left unlocked and you should lock it." I mumble something to the effect of, thanks, and he leaves my apartment. He just left. I'm still as blind as a bat, but I see that he walks away instead of getting into a car. No policeman would be policing the woody area I live in on foot. The next day, I called the local police station and asked if any officers had reported this incident, and they said they would check with the on-duty officers and get back to me. They called me the next day and said no one had done this. I still get freaked out when I think about this happening, and I wish I knew what that guy was up to. I once got on a pretty crowded Bloor bus and thought I had begun a jovial conversation with a random guy. We said random drunk things to each other for a while, and it seemed as though we were getting along merrily. Then we passed the shoe museum where there was a gigantic pair of high-heeled shoes in a window display. "What the fuck are those?" said my new friend. "I don't know," I replied, "but it's kind of hot." I thought this was funny, because we were drunk and that was the kind of stupid talk we'd been talking the whole time, and because if someone actually existed to wear those shoes, she would have been 20 feet tall. "Yeah," he asked calmly. "How about I fucking skin you?" "Huh," I said, confused at the sudden turn in our discourse. "I'm going to fucking kill you and skin you alive," he shouted. I am 6'4" and probably had 60 pounds on him, but a moment ago I had been happy and laughing and was suddenly afraid. He froze me into a stunned and frightened silence. As the bus made a normal stop, he leaped at me and started shoving me towards the door. Not like one big shove, but like 100 little frantic shoves. Bemused and startled, I just kind of let it happen, and then watched as he stared at me through the window of the leaving bus. I have no idea if he was wasted or crazy or just randomly decided to fuck with me. But in the future, I know to be more careful when I decide to have a drunk conversation with another drunk random person while I ride in public transportation.